us this project Bazinga Game. First of all, we should know what Bazinga Game is. Bazinga Game is a hand game usually played by two people where players simultaneously form one of 5 shapes with an outstretched hand. Now let's see what are the hand shapes while playing this game manually. This is rock, this is paper, this is scissors, this is spoke, and this is lizard. How to play? Here, any option of each player is dominant upon any 2 other options of another player. Now let's see how the game works. If player 1 presses rock and player 2 presses scissors or lizard, then player 1 wins because rock crushes scissors and rock crushes lizard. If player 1 presses paper and player 2 presses rock or spoke, then player 1 wins because paper covers rock and paper disproves spoke. If player 1 presses lizard and player 2 presses paper or spoke, then player 1 wins because lizard eats paper and lizard poisons spoke. If player 1 presses spoke and player 2 presses scissors or rock, then player 1 wins because spoke vaporizes rock or spoke smashes scissors. If player 1 presses scissors and player 2 presses paper or lizard, then player 1 wins as scissors cuts paper and scissor decapitates lizard. We have implemented a table which shows our algorithm. Here the first row shows 5 options of player 1 and first column shows 5 options of player 2. From this table we can see that if player 1 presses rock and player 2 presses rock, the result will be tie. If player 1 presses paper and player 2 also presses paper, the result will also be tie. So we can see that from 5 by 5 matrix, the diagonal elements shows the tie result. Now here 1 stands for the player 1's victory and 0 stands for the player 2's victory. Let us consider first column. If player 1 presses rock and player 2 presses rock, the result will be tie. If player 1 presses rock and player 2 presses paper, the player 2 wins because paper covers rock. If player 1 presses rock and player 2 presses scissor, player 1 wins because rock crashes scissor. If player 1 presses rock and player 2 presses lizard, then player 1 wins. And if player 1 presses rock and player 2 presses spoke, player 2 wins. We can also consider the third column, which shows us that if player 1 presses scissor and player 2 presses rock, player 2 wins. And if player 1 presses scissor, player 2 presses paper, player 1 wins. Similarly, we can see all the values 0 and 1 shows us respectively player 2 and player 1's victory. Now let's see the Proteus file how we designed our circuit. Here is the 555 timer. Each switch is connected to the output of 555 timer. Here suppose in first AND gate one input is from rock of player 1, another from scissor of player 2. In the second AND gate one input is from rock of player 1 and another is from lizard of player 2. In this way, for 5 options of player 1 there are 10 AND gates. Then using OR gates, ultimately we got the output for which player 1 wins. Now for tie, 5 AND gates are used. In each of them diagonal inputs are given. After using OR gates of these ANDs, we get the output of tie. Now these OR gates shows that player 1 and 2 presses any switch. Using XOR we get the output of someone misses. Now using NOT gate and the logic that player 1 did not win, tie did not occur, also we get that player 2 wins. Now using 74174 IC we saved the result. This game can not only be run by 12 volt but also 5 volt. There are 5 buttons of player 1 named rock, paper, scissors, lizard, spoke. And here are 5 buttons of player 2, rock, paper, scissors, lizard, spoke. If player 1 wins, this LED will indicate his win. and this LED will be for player 2, and this one stands for the case where any one of the two misses. This LED will be for tie. We know that if player 1 presses rock and player 2 presses paper, player 2 wins as paper covers rock. Here it is. Again, if player 1 presses lizard and player 2 presses spoke, then player 1 wins as lizard poison spoke. Here it is. If anyone presses and another can't, then this LED will lit and no other LED will glow then. Here it is. And now if two players presses the same button, then this LED will indicate the tie. Here it is. If the player presses paper button, then this LED will lit up and no other LED will lit. If both the player presses scissor button, then this LED will lit up. For the case when both presses lizard button, this LED will lit up. If both the player presses spoke button, this LED will lit up. We will see how 555 timer works. We will connect 555 timer circuit with the existing circuit. How will we do that? We will connect voltage sources of player 1 and 2 to the output of 555 timer. Now after pressing trigger of 555 timer, if we presses player 1 and 2's button, it will work certain time defined previously. Now we press 555 timer, and then if player 2 presses rock and player 1 presses lizard, player 2 wins. Here it is. Without pressing 555 timer, if we press any button of player 1 and if we press any button of player 2, no LED will lit up. Here it is. Now timing is controlled by using the variable resistance of 555 timer.